thank you for coming. It's a packed house. I am really honored and thankful that Peter Leiden and Russell Wyndham invited me to be here with you tonight. It's, a distinguished lineup of previous speakers that have given this address, and I'm honored to be included in such a group. I'd also like to thank our clients at Yale University for giving us so many wonderful opportunities on the campus that I can share with you today. And of course, all of the donors that support that work, because nothing happens without them. I'd also like to thank Ariane Khoury, my research colleague in the office, who spent a tremendous amount of time this week helping me to put these slides together in their final form. The tension between classical and traditional architecture and modernism has been a feature of architectural debate for many years. My generation owes a debt to the trailblazers, many in this room, who made it possible for us to study and practice traditional architecture. However, I believe we may also have grown weary of two-sided debates that suggest that one approach or another is right or wrong. Instead, we see possibility in the space between, looking to the accumulated wisdom in the buildings, towns, and cities all around us, while also casting a critical eye toward what works and what doesn't, whether it's a vernacular structure, an indigenous settlement, plain, everyday buildings, or the work of a renowned architect. Where some see opposition, I see dynamic conversational partners and the creativity that comes from entertaining all ideas in a search for enduring solutions. This may be why I've always been fascinated by Yale, a place where modern and traditional architecture so strikingly coexist, and also why I found a fitting mentor in Robert Stern, someone who's walked a line between these two ideas in different ways for the last 50 years. I've been invited to talk about our firm's work at Yale, a place I've known since I was a child. Yale shaped me, and I've been lucky to have an opportunity to help shape pieces of Yale in return. RAMSA has completed 3 projects at Yale. Our first, the smallest, the Greenberg Conference Center, is Yale's premier space for international leadership programs. The second, one of the largest projects Yale's built this century, Pauli Murray and Benjamin Franklin Colleges. And the most recent, a restoration and renewal project at the heart of the student experience, the Yale Schwarzman Center. Each of these projects, in their own way, reinforced Yale's sense of place. Along with other recent construction, they realized the potential foreseen in Cooper Robertson's Campus Framework Plan of 2000, strengthening the important north-south axis along Prospect Street, creating an identifiable Yale context between the Central Campus and Science Hill, bridging the gap at the Grove Street Cemetery, reviving Carrere and Hastings bicentennial buildings, where new developments to the north and the Central Campus come together, and providing for east-west pedestrian connections, developing a more unified campus for future generations. But before I show you our projects at Yale, I'd like to briefly take us to Harvard to pay homage to the work of McKim, Mead, and White and Charles McKim, for whom this lecture is named. My very first project on a college campus was the Spangler Center at the Harvard Business School. McKim, Mead, and White's design, the product of a winning competition scheme executed in 1925, is a series of buildings that elegantly follow the curve of the Charles River and carry forward the Georgian style that defines much of Harvard's Cambridge campus. In 1998, we were hired to design the Spangler Center, highlighted in yellow on the slide. Our prompt was to rekindle a sense of community in a professional school that at 1,800 students had swelled to the size of a small college. This project was also a chance to give Harvard a new front door facing Allston, where the university had amassed significant acreage for expansion and which had already become the preferred vehicular approach. We found a business school that was losing its stylistic coherence as new buildings in a variety of contemporary styles had been added along its Allston edge. Thinking it was time for reviving the brand, we looked to McKim, Mead & White, using their curving geometry and Georgian style, to create a new series of welcoming campus spaces. As a young designer, this experience offered foundational lessons that I've carried forward through my entire career. Now back to New Haven. I grew up just a few miles away. My mother was from West Haven, and her aunt married a Phelps, a member of an old Connecticut family with close ties to Yale and a history on campus. As a result, she spent a lot of time in New Haven, growing up enjoying the many cultural activities the city and the campus had to offer. She made sure this was an important part of my childhood, too. It was my first exposure to an urban place, which I found thrilling. And I'd ask my parents to take me there frequently to look at what I called the real buildings. And remember the surprising moment when my mother told me that the Gothic structures I adored were actually not much older than she was. After studying architecture at the University of Notre Dame and working in Florida, I returned to Connecticut for graduate school. Vincent Scully's lectures reinforced that American architectural history, from colonial settlement to traditional 19th century planning, to the advent of modernism and the mistakes of 1960s urban renewal, were all visible at Yale and in the city. Now, deeply immersed in the campus as a student, I saw it through new eyes. On my walks, I discovered urban connections I hadn't previously noticed. And I was delighted by my unfettered access to building interiors and locked courtyards, my favorite being the Georgian courtyard that hides behind the Gothic facade at Davenport College. In addition to Harkness Tower and his other campus monuments, I realized that James Gamble Rogers' miles of buildings were doing a lot of hard work, clearly defining streets and walkways, and enclosing quiet internal courtyards, arranging an engaging and beautiful backdrop to campus life. Rogers acknowledged that he designed with a scenographic mindset, composing buildings to speak to one another across streets and courts in a way that would create a coherent campus woven through the city. The trick I admired at Davenport was his way of introducing a Georgian edge that would speak to the residential neighborhoods along the college's west side, while also allowing the building to relate to its Gothic companion, Saybrook College, across the street to the east. I now saw that Rogers' buildings were in essence both the stars and the all-important supporting characters in Yale's story. It was clear to me that what I'd appreciated as a child was the outdoor museum of buildings sprinkled across Yale's campus, all seamlessly held together by Rogers' cohesive fabric. This seems unique in a world where many campuses, and in fact many cities, have promoted an architecture of its time, so much so that to me they seem to have a sameness that feels placeless. Whereas at Yale, the curated balance between modern and traditional buildings creates an enduring presence that is unmistakable. I'd like to show you how I think this works, how our projects add to the campus, and the lessons I think Yale's development holds. Within popular imagination, the image on this slide, stone Gothic towers and courtyards arranged in a manner of Oxford and Cambridge, is Yale. But it's important to remember that this image is really a 20th century invention, built when Yale was already over 200 years old and constructed in large part on the ruins of two campuses that preceded it. The first, the Yale of the 18th century, was the so-called Brick Row. It included austere dormitories, classrooms, and a chapel reflecting Yale and New Haven's Puritan roots. In the 19th century, the Brick Row was rejected, too closely associated with utilitarian mill towns, and a second campus, a new stone Yale, was built with fine buildings by notable architects. The university entered the 20th century with a bold plan for transformation in order to address its integration with the adjacent Sheffield Scientific School and to cope with a growing student body. The construction of the bicentennial buildings by Carrere and Hastings in 1901 was intended to bring together the two institutions, creating one unified university. The complex of integrated buildings housed the Commons, a dining facility, Woolsey Hall, a large auditorium, and Memorial Hall, the domed connector between the two that housed ceremonial gathering rooms, and importantly, Yale's War Memorial. Shortly thereafter, John Russell Pope's 1919 campus plan established the predominant use of the stone collegiate Gothic and the typology of perimeter buildings with interior courtyards. He also proposed a series of grand axial connections between the city and the campus. Although Pope's unifying vision was ultimately unrealized, James Gamble Rogers' revisions and execution of his plan resulted in an entirely new campus of Gothic and Georgian quadrangles. Rogers' first major architectural project at Yale was the Memorial Quadrangle, completed in 1921. The motivation behind the quadrangle was to provide communal accommodations for students who'd been pushed off campus by growing enrollment, missing out on the informal social bonding that Yale President Hadley believed should underpin the college experience. Paraphrasing, Hadley's vision was for a glorious, monumental building around which life and loyalty could grow, and to which tradition and sentiment could attach. He also lamented the way post-World War I industrialization had pushed architecture toward efficiency and away from the types of buildings that he thought would inspire affection and loyalty. His goal seemed to be the creation of a beautiful campus as a means of societal healing. The Kentucky-born Rogers, who'd never been to Oxford or Cambridge, turned to his collection of European postcard clippings for inspiration and developed his own modern interpretation of the English secular Gothic. His composition of courts of different sizes surrounded by buildings of varying heights was an inventive take on the Oxbridge tradition, also particularly well suited to New Haven's urban density and climate. It's important to note that at this point, the Memorial Quadrangle was not a residential college. It was simply a dormitory. But its success showed that comparable arrangements could solve Yale's housing shortage and also foster greater social cohesion. In 1926, Rogers and Yale President Angell proposed a true residential college system, including not just dormitories, but also dining, study, social amenities, and faculty housing, more closely modeled on the Oxford and Cambridge, where he and Rogers subsequently visited together. President Angell, recognizing the success of his predecessor's move away from the architectural trends of the day, supported Rogers' design of the traditional Gothic and Georgian colleges that became the underlying DNA of the campus. Construction began in 1930, and by 1940, 10 years, Yale had opened the first 10 residential colleges, intended to break down the university into smaller social units and create stronger bonds between students. All the new colleges were inspiring compositions, all wholly inventive. There were some critics of Yale's adopted Gothic persona at the time, notably William Harlan Hale, writing in an undergraduate review called The Harkness Hoot in 1930, who questioned the quote-unquote Girder Gothic being deployed at Yale, while great minds elsewhere were fashioning a new age of minimalist, transparent, unsentimental architecture. But in the end, Hadley's logic, which Angell later supported, created the constellation of communities beloved by students and alumni. After World War II, the institution shifted architectural focus under the leadership of President Griswold and the guidance of Eero Saarinen as planner. During this period, the campus was peppered with singular buildings by some of the post-war generation's leading modernist architects. These were intended to represent Hadley and Angell's University to the world as a modern, research-based institution. New buildings were commissioned from Louis Kahn, Gordon Bunshaft, Paul Rudolph, and Eero Saarinen. Though highly individualistic, these buildings were knit into the campus context and transformed the university. The largest, and possibly the most unique of this period, was a pair of new residential colleges designed by Eero Saarinen, named for Samuel Morse and Ezra Stiles, and completed in 1962. Saarinen studied architecture at Yale and graduated in 1934, a year after the first 8 residential colleges opened. He witnessed firsthand the transformation of campus culture and that the addition of Rogers Memorial Quadrangle and the subsequent residential colleges had brought. His 2 colleges, though modern in architectural expression, remained true to the sensibility of Rogers. Saarinen used the structures to shape a series of outdoor spaces, integrated with Rogers Hall of Graduate Studies, which you see on the bottom right in this plan, and John Russell Pope's Payne Whitney Gymnasium at the top right. The project even included a retail arm along Elm Street, engaging New Haven's commercial core. Saarinen's work was praised at the time. Architectural records said this was a new kind of architecture that seems to belong to old Yale. And progressive architecture highlighted the blending of an exciting new concept with older styles for an admirable homogeneity. Saarinen's greater departure from Rogers' precedents was actually in the planning of the interiors. Although the characteristic public, social, and study spaces were retained, suites of multiple bedrooms around a common room were replaced by single bedrooms in response to student feedback. This was a dramatic change for Yale, one which ultimately proved unsuccessful, but was cleverly rectified in renovations by Kieran Timberlake. Prompted by the advent of coeducation in 1969, Yale President Brewster contemplated 2 additional residential colleges designed by Mitchell Jarugala. The project was never realized due to community opposition and lacked the nuanced inventiveness and respect for campus DNA that Saarinen had understood. In the late 1990s, President Levin took his own turn at reshaping campus, also planning for a groundbreaking 15% expansion of the student body. Levin began by addressing decades of deferred maintenance, including at each of the 12 residential colleges. He then turned to new construction, adding, among others, 2 major projects on the north side of the campus, Norman Foster's Yale School of Management and our new residential colleges. Like his predecessors, Levin followed the idea that different sites and programs warranted different approaches. He decided that colleges following Rogers' Gothic and Georgian model would help an expanded student body feel welcome, while the School of Management might be a better opportunity for a departure. Our selection as architects for the new colleges was covered by some in the press as a surprising turn back to traditionalism at Yale, a few even reprising Girder Gothic-like criticisms. But in fact, the university had quietly been building traditionally inspired buildings all along. following its long-standing pattern. Projects such as Coleman McKinley Woods Biology Building, David Schwartz's addition to the Peabody Museum, and Tom Beebe's renovation of the cross-campus library into the new Bass Library were all traditional successes. To some extent, even KPMB's Adams Center, built at the same time as our colleges, and Michael Hopkins' Croon Hall, built just before, were also transitional structures doing much to reinforce the context. Our colleges were simply one more piece in this continuum. The site we were given across from Saarinen's Ingalls Rink and bordered by the historic Grove Street Cemetery had been identified in Cooper Robertson's framework plan as a key development opportunity where an identifiable Yale fabric would serve to better connect the campus core with Science Hill. As we began the design work, our research revealed that James Gamble Rogers' initial client presentation for the Memorial Quadrangle contained just two simple architectural exhibits. One was a detailed plan of the entryway system, the residential model deployed at Yale for more than 300 years, comprised of 2 suites with bedrooms and a common room, sharing a bathroom and a stair. The other, a detailed plaster model delivering a stirring impression of the overall scheme. We followed the same approach, focused first on a modified version of Yale's historic entryway that would meet current egress codes while retaining small student groupings. At the same time, we used a model to explore the arrangement of buildings and courtyards on the site. The model made it clear that taller elements aligned with the street grid would make these new colleges visible from the central campus, helping to collapse the perceived distance between our site and the older residential colleges, and bringing these new buildings into conversation with the campus core. To meet various city and infrastructural requirements, the site required a pedestrian street between the two colleges. And to assure this walkway would be in scale with similar passages around the campus, we compared its size and shape to the spaces between Pearson and Davenport colleges, Fraternity Row, and Library Walk between Brantford and Jonathan Edwards. We did the same with the courtyards, so that our courts would have the same pleasant variety in size and massing as Rogers. Like Rogers, we also placed taller buildings to the north and lower buildings to the south, so our courtyards would be sunny even on short winter days. We toured Oxford and Cambridge, reaching beyond Rogers' work to the precedents that he himself had studied. At each scale of design, we look back to the precedents we thought we knew so well, and Rogers continued to teach us. We created a catalog of type and variation for every element of the buildings. This book helped us to understand how Rogers combined repetitive items with unique details to achieve both efficiency and variety. Following this model, but also using digital tools and modern prefabrication techniques, we were able to build these new colleges with their significant detail and amenities for the same cost per square foot, of course escalated to $2017, as Saarinen's concrete structures from the 1960s. Conceived as fraternal twins, the two colleges offer the same accommodations and amenities, but are different in character. Like the historic colleges, ours combine large courtyards, size to accommodate commencement ceremonies and class reunions, and smaller intimate courtyards that create a series of outdoor spaces around which the student suites and shared facilities are distributed. The dining halls and common rooms are located across from one another on Prospect Walk, and each pair is distinctive. The dining hall at Benjamin Franklin is inspired by Christopher Wren and Edwin Lutyens, while the Pauli Murray dining hall combines Gothic and classical details in a Tudor-Beethoven mix seen in many of Rogers' designs. The libraries are designed to hold the books each college will collect over time and also provide space for individual and group study. At the lower level, the colleges share a fitness center, art and music spaces, a dance studio, a theater, and late-night student-run food service venues. Both colleges contain a house designed as the home for the head of college and their family members. They also provide space for the many social events planned to enhance student life. Our designs include many ornamental details in iron and in stone. The ironwork is inspired by Rogers' collaboration with master blacksmith Samuel Yellin. We were fortunate to find our own ironwork master, Zoltan Kovacs, who I think is here, a Hungarian-trained craftsman working in New Jersey. Pictured here are key gates at Benjamin Franklin College and Pauli Murray College. Like the Rogers era colleges, ours feature a rich array of stone ornament. Carved limestone elements were produced by Ontario-based traditional cut stone. For highly repetitive elements like window frames and bay windows, we use cast stone pieces formed by CNC cut molds. Interestingly, Rogers also experimented with cast elements on some of his buildings. Yale that always gets you, right? Yale collaborated with architect and historian Pat Pinnell on a collection of commemorative stone pieces depicting academic disciplines, student life, famous alumni, and bits of New Haven culture, but not the Bob Goyle that you're all enjoying so much, which was actually a gift from Traditional Cut Stone. With the completion of these new colleges and the shift of so many students to the university's north side, the bicentennial buildings took on more importance, and President Solovey took his turn adding to Yale, recasting these historic buildings as the Schwarzman Center, the campus center that students had long wanted. In 2021, the center opened its doors, revealing a new social hub dedicated to learning and building community through cultural programming. The restoration of the ornate dining hall known as the Commons was one of the more complicated endeavors. We returned this timber truss refectory to its former grandeur while simultaneously bringing it into the 21st century. We ensured that modern interventions would go unseen and historic elements would be carefully preserved, restoring spaces with the lightest touch possible in order to retain their historic patina while accentuating their details with soft lighting. Audiovisual equipment and theatrical lighting now make it possible to easily convert the dining hall into a state-of-the-art concert and performance venue, and in case you think your eyes are tricking you, that is indeed a performance group called Vandaloop hanging from the structural trusses in the ceiling. We carefully removed original woodwork to add heating and air conditioning systems while returning the restored and reconfigured pieces to conceal the equipment. The floor of Commons required complete replacement. We didn't suggest this, we needed to do this, and it presented a huge opportunity. With the existing structure removed during construction, we were able to dig out below the basement floor level under both Commons and Memorial Hall so that we could capture more ceiling height, making it possible to replace kitchen and storage areas with new student space. Below the Commons, we built a sophisticated dining and study area with fireplaces and ingle nooks that doubles as an additional large-scale performance venue. Underneath the rotunda, a new circular room serves as an on-campus pub, outfitted with a bar and seating and a banquette along the newly exposed granite foundation walls. Adjacent to these spaces, underground additions were built to accommodate dance, art installations, and a food market. Over the years, many of the spaces on the upper floors had lost their historic features. Plasterwork in the president's room was reconstructed. The horrible light fixtures were removed from the ceiling. In some cases, there were no clear reference drawings, so the details that we added back were actually reinterpreted. The once grand space between the rotunda's signature dome, which for 40 years had been broken up into small offices for the yearbook, was cleared and repurposed as an experimental performance space, now used for productions in the round with video projection. Along Grove Street, a new annex blends in with the existing building quite intentionally. This addition was inspired by an unbuilt proposal by Carrere and Hastings and replaced a one-story kitchen. The surprise here is on the inside, where the narrow proportions are accentuated by a series of meeting rooms and double-height student lounges. Large windows and skylights, aligned with the Commons' original openings, provide a visual contrast with the existing limestone facade that now doubles as an interior wall. The design ensuring that Commons continues to get good natural light from the north. Outside, the oval landscape created by Laurie Olin in the early 2000s that so gracefully incorporated the historic flagpole and cenotaph, also parts of Yale's War Memorial, was removed entirely and reconstructed to make way for the new underground facilities. We made just one subtle change, the inclusion of an outdoor stair following the oval of Olin's scheme, alleviating the well-used pedestrian path through the rotunda and providing easy access to the underground facilities. Coming up the stair, when leaving the building, you enter the Hewitt Quadrangle, greeted by a view of the Beinecke Library, the Schwarzman Center's facade, and the Book and Snake Society's classical temple, framing longer views to the law school beyond. The Beinecke Library, although clearly composed by Gordon Bunshaft as a floating modernist object, together with its sunken Noguchi Court, also acknowledges the memory of an original unrealized Carrere and Hastings design enclosing the quadrangle, with Beinecke's box-like mass completing the space. Its innovative facade is composed of structural Varandale trusses infilled with thin marble panels to control light on the interior. The result, a kind of funereal columbarium-like impression, expresses the building's use as a protective tomb for valuable historic books and manuscripts, and acts as an appropriately staged companion to the Schwarzman Center's facade, which doubles as Yale's monument to World War I's great battles. While most people don't think about the Beinecke as a building that consciously relates to its surroundings, I see a reverence for the sacred war memorial that helps to bind Bunshaft's building to its classical neighbors. The Schwarzman Center's light touch to the Hewitt Quadrangle similarly respects the formality and solemn importance of this space. Our two major contributions to Yale's campus, the colleges and the Schwarzman Center, tackle vastly different architectural and campus-making challenges, but both show ways of inventing within a tradition in the service of reinforcing Yale's identity, putting that all-important goal first. Each time I pause to think about Yale, including in preparation for this talk, I see something new. This time, reflecting on my experience as a young girl, as a student, as a faculty member, and as an architect working on the campus, I see more than just the museum of buildings that I once admired. I see a succession of Yale planners and presidents unafraid to freely toggle between buildings that strengthen Yale's unique sense of place and buildings that punctuate its context, putting place before polemics. The result is an intentional, balanced composition, curated over time, that leaves a powerful imprint on students, visitors, and the architects who work there. So much so that even architects inclined toward innovation and free expression, like Saarinen and Bunshaft, are intuitively guided to make their buildings work together with everything else. I believe this is what gives Yale's modern buildings and traditional buildings their staying power, inspiring generations of love and loyalty, and showing how architects can work together to plan better campuses, towns, and cities for our future. Thank you.